Hello, everyone, and welcome to one more Nomadmania interview in a series where we've had a number of incredible people interviewed. I think the one today might be the most incredible. Today, our guest is Rauli Virtanen from Finland. And we believe that he may well be the very first person to have legitimately visited every country in the world. Apart from that, he is a renowned journalist focusing on conflict, a man who has been covering the darker sides of world history for the past 50 years. And right now, he has just completed a book called From Vietnam to Ukraine, which is being published and about which he will talk more with us. So without further ado, here is Rauli Virtanen, and it is a real pleasure to have him as our guest today.
Thank you, Harry. Good morning. My pleasure to be talking to you.
Hello. How is Helsinki today?
Helsinki and Espoo, these are twin cities. I live in Espoo side. It's a pretty good weather considering that the whole world is burning and whole world is in flames. But here in Finland, luckily, the weather is not so bad today.
Okay. Now, you've lived in Helsinki or Espoo for a large part of your life. Let's go back to the 50s and 60s, and let's look at both Finland and Helsinki and your life. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how things were back then for you and for Finland?
Well, actually, I grew up in near Lahti, which is the fourth largest city, a famous ski sports center, and part of my childhood I spent in the countryside. Then entered the high school in Lahti, and that time Finland was not very international. We were recovering from the war but quickly modernizing Finland, becoming an industrial society, being before very much an agricultural society. But because of the war compensations we had to pay for the Soviet Union, we became more industrialized. So that's maybe one of the few good things that came out after the war, when we lost 10% of our area, mostly Karelia, and just relating to Karelia, we are now having an exhibition about evacuees, about refugees, internally displaced people in Lahti, my hometown, together with my classmate who became a painter. So he has been painting his family roots in Karelia and their refugee story, and then at the same exhibition I'm showing my photos from Ukraine, refugees from Ukraine and other parts of the world, so that people hopefully will feel a bit more empathy towards refugees. But Lahti basically has been my hometown, and I'm going there now a few times a week for the exhibition to give lectures to people. And the most important role, why I'm still traveling and why I have been traveling so widely and working, has been thanks to my teachers. The first teacher was very enthusiastic about nature, geography, etc. So I became interested in the world affairs, and then my Finnish language teacher was reading my articles and what I had to write, and told me that, Rauli, you should become a reporter. So I ended up reporting in Lahti in the provincial newspaper more than 50 years ago. So that's
So that's how you started. That was your early introduction to the world of journalism.
Yeah.
Right. So you started reporting. How did you jump from general reporting to sort of war reporting? How did that happen?
Well, I was interested in foreign lands, foreign countries, and my first job at the foreign desk of the provincial newspaper, they told me that you should concentrate in Latin America because everyone else was concentrating on Soviet Union, United States, Germany, etc. So I took it very seriously, and then I was studying a bit about the same issues at the University of Tampere, and where I studied journalism and international affairs. And noticing that here I am in Finland writing about Che Guevara and Latin America without never being there. So I jumped to a cargo ship and took a ship from Finland to Rio de Janeiro. And I made a 10-month backpacking trip in South America and North America. And during that trip, I was sending articles to provincial papers in Finland. And afterwards, I counted my person. I noticed that I have managed to earn $100 each month, and with that $100 I was moving myself forward from Brazil to Alaska, mostly hitchhiking, etc. So that was a big experience. And then I during that trip I learned to trust people. I learned to become less shy and to be more open. I mean, if I wanted to have a place to sleep or something to eat, I had to open my mouth and try my Spanish or Portuguese or English. And so
shyness is one of the characteristics of the Finns, isn't it?
Yes.
Being very closed and stuff, right? Right.
Yes.
So you differentiated yourself from that. What year was that, Rauli?
That was in 1970-71. And after that, I applied a job for at two of the big Helsinki newspapers at the foreign desk. The other one called me, and I moved to Helsinki. And after a few months, I told my editor-in-chief that there's a war in Vietnam. I want to go and cover the war in Vietnam. And for some reason, they accepted my idea. So that was my first war in 1972. In September, I flew to Saigon. That time it was South Vietnam, and then there I traveled with the American. Of course, I had to be so-called embedded with the American military in order to fly in their helicopters and planes and traveled around in South Vietnam, but not so much covering the war itself, but already then I was interested in what's happening to the victims of the war, what are the causes of the war. So I visited refugee camps, I visited hospitals, I visited funerals, etc. So that's how it all started, and then the rest is history.
All right. Now, Rauli, I mean, in your 50-year plus career, you've probably faced an incredible number of situations. Can you maybe give us a couple that really stand out, things that have really stayed with you?
Well, there are many historical situations in my new book I'm writing about. Actually, it's full of pictures, almost 400 pictures, about the Tiananmen demonstrations in May, that probably 1 million Chinese went to the streets to demand more democracy. I was in Bucharest, Romania in 89, Christmas time, witnessing the Romanian Revolution there. I was in 1979 in Managua, Nicaragua, with the Sandinistas, and witnessing the revolution, which of course later on you say that the revolution, it's eating her children. It didn't go very well. So this kind of historical events, and then of course meeting people, starting from Nelson Mandela, which was probably the greatest honor I could have that to sit down with him and interview him and travel with him to different places, stadiums, see the huge welcome he received after serving such a long time in prison. And then other people, spending a day with Muhammad Ali and Yasser Arafat and Kofi Annan, etc. But still, I always emphasize the most important, most heartwarming events are just meeting with the local people, the friendly people in developing countries. The more poor they are, it seems, the more hospitable they are, and welcoming the visitors and humble people, workers, and etc. So that has given me a lot of strength and optimism in the future.
Yeah. Well, this is my question. You've seen so much pain and the misery and devastation. How do you deal with this on a sort of psychological, emotional level during being there, and then afterwards when you mentally process it?
Well, there are, of course, I mean, sometimes when you are there and you end up in a dangerous situation for yourself, and then you say that I'll never do this again. I was a stupid guy when I came here. If I'm getting killed here, I hope nobody is shedding tears for me because he was a stupid guy. He went into the war. But I always want to emphasize that we foreign correspondents, we are visiting places, we don't stay there for too long. But our fixers, the people who are helping us in Ukraine, like Orest, stay there all the time, and they are risking their life 24/7. And we very seldom, at the end of stories, let's say New York Times writing a story from Iraq, from the war, at the end of the story, sometimes they mention that the story was possible with the help of a local stringer, Hussein or Mohammed or whatever. So I sometimes I feel a bit frustrated when in the Western press we make big headlines about a Western foreign correspondent being hurt or killed, but we hardly ever mention what's happening to the brave journalists in Mexico, Philippines, Russia, who are fighting against the narco mafias and corruption, etc., and being killed, etc. So in that sense, it's not fair. But answering to the latter part of your question, of course, you have to protect yourself mentally. Some people, especially people who are in humanitarian area, they cannot bear it, what they see, and then they stop doing it. In my profession, the most important warning sign is don't become cynical. I mean, if you become cynical, then you have to leave. But of course, it puts a stamp on you, on your thinking, and etc. And I think in my case, it hopefully has been only positive that I still want to remind the world, my readers, people who are looking at my photo exhibitions, what these people in the poor countries in conflict situations are going through.
Okay. Now, of the people you met, you already mentioned Nelson Mandela as sort of perhaps the one who impressed you most. Why? Why Mandela? What was it about him that has really, made a difference?
Well, the whole aura and of course the charisma, but basically the non-bitterness. He didn't show any bitterness of what he had experienced during those, was it 27 years in different prisons during the apartheid. So and his friendliness, his gentle approach, and sense of humor, all these things. So I really admired him, late Nelson Mandela, definitely. Yeah. Unfortunately, now in South Africa, things have not been going into the very good condition. There's still economical apartheid in the country, as we know, and then we know about ANC corruption cases, etc. So probably Nelson Mandela wouldn't rest very peacefully in his grave if he would know about this. And in today's world, we need more Mandelas. Definitely, it's very difficult to find another Mandela today.
Indeed. What do you think? There is anyone around who might be anywhere close to Mandela nowadays? Or, I mean, if anyone can say it's you, based on your experience.
No, I don't see somebody. The Marwan Barghouti is a Palestinian activist who is in Israeli prison. He has been labeled as a Middle East Palestinian Mandela, but I think the Israelis keep him in prison. But we need someone like Mandela, because, as you know, Israel is being accused of being following apartheid policies. So Middle East is still the power kid, and there more than in any other place we need Mandela, and of course in Europe at the moment, in the context of the Ukraine, Russia, it's difficult to find anyone who can make sense and tell Putin that now please leave Ukraine and sign the peace deal.
Right. Yeah. Well, that would be ideal, but
yeah,
it's not so easy. Okay, Rauli. Well, let us turn to your writing. So obviously, as a foreign correspondent, you have written many articles throughout the years, but you've also written a few books in the past. Why don't you tell us a bit about your older books, the ones you've done before, what they were about, and why you wrote them?
My first book was late 70s when I had traveled Latin America, which was the first continent I used to specialize in. So I went there again and again. Actually, now in September, it's 50 years since the Chilean military coup when Pinochet took the power there. I went. I left the same day in New York when I heard in the news, September 11, that what's happening in Chile. Then I witnessed the dirty war in Argentina and went to Cuba and all, of course, all the Latin American countries very, very early, and including Caribbean countries. So I wrote a book about Latin America in late 70s. Then I've been writing a book about Finns, my countrymen, Finns as peacekeepers, the history basically since 1956 when the Finns were part of the UN forces to Suez Canal and until they've been lately serving in Afghanistan. There are still, not anymore of course, but still some Finns participating in the peacekeeping operations. I've been writing another book about development cooperation between Finland and those people who have the pioneers of the development cooperation when they went to Tanzania in the early 1960s, 70s and until today. Then I have been written another book about humanitarian Finnish humanitarian workers, mostly doctors, nurses, etc., who have been. Finnish Red Cross is quite visible. They are one of the big countries that's sending field hospitals to areas that are hit by earthquakes, like in Kashmir or Haiti or those places. So I interviewed all the doctors and nurses and people in logistics about their feelings, how they feel, why they are like kind of hooked, like I'm hooked in foreign reporting. They are hooked in assisting, helping people, because very often they say that they are getting more benefit from it than they can give to the people. But that you understand what I mean? It's so worthwhile for them, because different than being at the hospital in Finland, big hospital, than being in the field and saving with your own hands, helping to save lives. So those things. And then I've written the latest book was about the Finnish sailors in foreign ports, whatever happened, especially during the Russian time when we had very strong presence in Alaska and other places. So all kind of things, interned Finnish sailors during the wars when we used to be unluckily allied with the Germans, how Finns were detained, imprisoned different parts of the world, and some of the pub brawls between Finns and Swedes in San Francisco and fighting in pubs and then marriages and things like that. So quite a colorful book about Finnish sailors. And then
involved a lot of historical research.
Yes, I like to do historical research, and that book was also very historical, because nowadays, I mean, with the container ships, you don't have time to go into the pub, and then if you go, I mean, when you come back and you have a hangover, your ship has left. There's no way. So it was a little bit difficult for me to find those harbor port pubs or bars that were still open, where I could actually, in Rio de Janeiro, I found some elderly ladies who told me that when I was 18 or 19, the legal age, a girl, I had a good time with the Finnish sailors who came here. Of course, she didn't remember, she didn't want to name the names, but things like that. So it was, and then for some reason, the most sold book in Finland it's called Reissukirja travel book, and which I've been talking about earlier, where I'm telling more personal stories, and especially about this trip I went to first time coming from Northern Europe to Brazil, and then all these difficulties and nice instances I met. So that it's a kind of travel book, and it's still selling, because the good thing about that book is there's not one address or telephone number of any hotel or any restaurant or anything, so it stays valid. So just a tip for advice to those who are writing travel books, that don't put their street addresses or telephone numbers or whatever. It's just of course it was
they become obsolete. Yeah.
Yes.
These books are only in Finnish, Rauli.
Only Finnish, yes.
Have you ever thought of having them translated for a bigger market, or not
Well,
really?
they are so much, as I mentioned, that they are so much Finland related that no, I haven't. But and then also, I think it's quite expensive, and then to find a market and marketing. So
Okay. But your latest book is not Finland related.
No.
Tell us about the new book, which is just being published now in August, or is it September 2023?
Yeah. End of September. That is actually a photo book, which I've said, and I'm happy you can put some of the pages, PDF pages, on your pages. It came after I had now I've been having 6-7 photo exhibitions. So people, when they come to photo exhibitions, which I have to jump to this subject, that's in today's world, you had so many photos and you are going through them on your mobile device. You never stop to think about that. There are too many photos there. So when you go to photo exhibition, you stop, you stand in front of the photo, you look at the eyes of the person, and that makes a big difference. And I hope this culture will stay. So after I had these photo exhibitions from 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, today, again, so many people tell us that now we have to leave this exhibition. It would be nice to have a photo book and at home. And of course they take some photos, and I don't mind. They can take photos of my photos. They are not so special. So finally, the publishing house I have been working with my previous photos. So they agreed that okay, we can make a photo book if it's selling few thousand copies, so we don't lose money, but you have to write there some stories so that people don't just browse the book at the bookshop and then leave, so that they don't have time to read the text in the bookshop, so they must buy the book with them and take it along. So I wrote quite a lot and started actually from Vietnam. I went there again last winter to My Lai, which was my second visit, in famous place where the Americans killed so many unarmed civilians and etc., which was a very shameful, and in a way it's ending up in Bucha. You have always these usual suspects in different decades killing people, and then I'm there wondering what's happening with the war criminals and how painstakingly slow the process is, that the war criminals, they are dying in a prison in Hague or in Cambodia before they are being brought to court. But like in Bucha is a very good example here, where we, from the beginning, there's so much information, witness information, documentation information, that it's overwhelming. So we just have to hope that sooner or later Putin and the other war criminals will end up in the criminal court. I remember during the Balkan wars, I covered them all in Croatia and in Bosnia and Kosovo. We were almost laughing to someone who said, okay, let's get Milosevic, Karadzic and Mladic into the court, into Hague, and soon they will be condemned. And how long did it take, and some of them died before that. But in the end, the justice will win. Unfortunately, many of the victims are dead, and the relatives, it's coming too late. But we should emphasize and put our belief that this system works. That there's no, of course, there are dangerous examples. Look at Assad in Syria. How many millions of people had to leave the country? How many people were tortured, killed? And now the same president, Assad, is walking on a red carpet again, like nothing happened. I mean, that's a bad example for others, dictators, Lukashenko, whoever, who think they can stay forever. They think they can kill and expel millions of people and still retain in power. So this is a very, very serious question.
Okay. Thank you, Rauli. So, I mean, what exactly motivated you to write this book at this point in your life? I mean, you could have done such a book 10 years ago or 20 based on your wealth of experience. Why now? Is it because it's 50 years, or is it the number that matters, or is it something else?
Well, I would say age is not a number, but you have to look at my face and look at me and how long time I have to be here. So that came, and also the thing is that I've been so busy lately that I didn't have time to properly organize my photo library. So now I've been taking, like, whole last winter, I was going through the tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 photos, and putting them in order. And then I had a very good photo editor who managed to make the graphic designer, so that the photos in the book, they're like talking to each other, and that makes sense. So another thing is that also, of course, I felt a little bit not sad but melancholic, or I was not very happy when I'm looking at my age, my career, working more than 50 years, trying to hoping that people read my books, read my articles, watch my TV programs, photos, and still the world is not going into the direction I would like to see it go. So the book, the whole the tone of the book is frankly speaking not encouraging, but I hope it encourages people to act before it's too late. I mean, earlier we were talking about climate change, but whatever, but also about conflict. So hopefully it's a kind of, I hope it's a kind of a wake up call for people, that now we have to do something about these things. So, but very few things there that can cause optimism, except the last chapter. I by purpose I wrote the last chapter instead of leaving people there in completely depressed and crying and saying that I never buy books from Rauli anymore. It's so depressing. So the last chapter is about education, and the title is "Let's Don't Cut the Education," because in Finland, every time politicians, a new government comes in, they said, we don't cut the education, and then they cut the education anyway. So that was the idea in my last chapter, with some happy faces. And as we all globetrotters know, that visiting a school, a local poor school, I mean, it makes us happy and it makes the children happy. But in the same time, when you look at the quality of schools here in South Sudan or whatever, it's also the sad feeling, and you just cannot tell the children that I mean, you hardly have any chance to fulfill your dreams because of the quality of your teachers, because of the poverty of your family, because of the books and situation in a country, and especially now. But still, we have to believe in education, be it in Finland or South Sudan, and fighting against the alternative truth and the fake news, etc. So that would be very, very important. And of course, the literacy rate has been, compared to 50 years ago, I mean, we are in a better shape. But all in all, the conclusion about this all, and the book, which is concentrating in developing countries, there are no German faces, there are American faces or Swedish faces in my book. Sometimes I'm saying jokingly that I hate civilized countries, because I feel at home in those developing countries, among the workers there, poor people there, friendly people there, etc. So I hate civilized countries, but don't take it too seriously. But the thing is that
we're not all so unfriendly in the civilized country.
yeah.
I like to think that there's some friendly faces around.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the main thing is that now we're living a very difficult time. First, it started with the pandemic, then became the Russian aggression in Ukraine, global inflation, and the climate change, the climate catastrophe. So this means in my book, I have lots of statistics. I hope people that don't get bored about it, how much back during the last 10, 15 years we have gone. The extreme poverty is increasing. The school people students dropping out from school is increasing, and prices of bread because of the Ukrainian wheat are increasing in Middle East, Horn of Africa. Prices of rice are increasing because India is now cutting the rice exports because of the climate change, etc. And then the populist policies all around the world, starting from Trump's or even Argentina may get a new Trump, and going to India and their Hindu nationalism there, etc. So we are living dangerous times, but the only consolation is what I can tell people that this is like the world history is goes up and down, and in the longer run we have to force us to believe that we reached the bottom, or we almost reached the bottom. That let's see, but that it, like I said, in my case, it may be that I'm gone before we see again the same kind of progress we made in after the Cold War stopped, and in the 90s, in 2000 and 2010, on the first decades of when everything went fine, people becoming more prosperous and more healthy, and etc. But now I hope we reach the lowest bottom at the moment.
So would you say overall you're an optimist or a pessimist?
Well, at the moment, if I'm realistically pessimist, but I have to keep up optimism. Otherwise, I would face myself that Rauli, you've been working for nothing. You've been doing a useless job for more than 50 years, believing that journalism has a place, believing that you can inform people, because if you look around your people who are then so I have to stay optimist, and as I mentioned earlier, those people, the fight they are putting on, and they're proud, and the self-respect, and the stamina from Ukraine to Sudan, whatever, that gives us hope that we don't give up. We have to defend democracy, and just adding to that long list I mentioned earlier, democracy is in decline. More and more populists and dictatorships are taking over, and there's less belief in democracy, and what is very alarming, like United States, people don't read anymore the traditional press, and in many areas people get their information from Facebook, or even worse, from TikTok, and that's what they discuss at the gas stations, and what the world is. So how can we fight with traditional journalists against all these forces? I mean, just to keep on producing the facts, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're aligned in that, Rauli. We at Nomadmania, we're also realistically pessimist, but we try to spread optimistic messages, because, travel and understanding other people is one way, to open minds and to get people to understand that, there are no real enemies out there. If anything, the enemy is within. So why don't we move a little bit to Rauli the Traveler? You have visited every country, and your last visited country, when you were first doing them, if I'm not mistaken, was Bhutan in 1988. Why don't I start by asking you, was this aim to visit every country? Well, was it in fact an aim? Was it something that you were working toward back then? Or did it just happen kind of by accident?
Well, it kind of happened by accident. I remember I probably had my visited 150 or 140 countries, and then one day I thought that maybe it's possible to visit all the 171 countries. That time I'm talking about 1980s, and so then I thought that okay, I have to remember that. I mean, besides working on I've been writing on almost most of the countries, but of course when I thought that okay, I could visit probably all the countries, so I said okay, now I have to go to Liechtenstein, I have to go to San Marino and Andorra and the countries very close to me in Europe. I never visited before because there were no stories there. So then I made these day trips or 2-day trips to these small countries and some other places. But I managed because I was also writing at that time for a Finnish weekly magazine, and they didn't mind putting travel stories, also publish travel stories. So they kindly sent me and even a photographer disguised as not as a journalist to North Korea in 1988, and then they even decided that we have to make a story about you visiting your last country, which was Bhutan. And again, they sent even a photographer with me, and then I did a story on Bhutan and on North Korea. At that time, it was very difficult to get in. So I managed to sell my stories to a Swedish newspaper, to a Dutch newspaper, and then and let's see, one of the American channels, they wanted to have the videotapes from there, and also the Far Eastern Economic Review, which was at that time the Newsweek or Time of Asia. They published my story from Pyongyang, and I was extremely proud, being a Finn, that my story was published in the most famous Asian magazine about North Korea. So that happened like that, and Satome Principe was one of the few last ones as well. And then I wrote a story about there and took pictures, but I didn't realize that this was something special. I noticed that the Guinness Book of World Records, the Finland edition, they mentioned that Rauli Virtanen is the first Finn to visit all the countries in the world. And I thought, okay, maybe that's probably true. I would have heard here in Finland if someone had traveled more. And then I was looking at some of the pages in California. There was one travel club, and they claimed that so and so many Americans, they visited all the countries. I said, okay, that's it. Until later on, I mean, now when you have been doing your research, which I don't dispute, that you probably told me, Harry, that the Americans who claimed they visited North Korea, they went to DMZ to the maybe took a step there. So in a way, on the other hand, it could be that since I did this in the 80s, that there were some people before me who visited all the countries, but they didn't have internet and they are already passed away. So you could say that I'm the last living person who has visited all the countries in the 1980s. So
yeah, it will indeed remain a mystery, but as far as we are concerned, you really are the first that we can verify and that we believe did it, in the way that is acceptable. Because I would say one of the battles that we have is, the issue of what does it mean to visit a country? And, if you go to the DMZ, I really don't think that can qualify as a visit to North Korea. Well, Rauli, have you ever traveled as a tourist rather than as a journalist or a man on a mission? Have you ever had a holiday?
Well, I had a holiday with my children, and still actually this year already with my grandchildren. We went to Corsica, which is part of the France, and enjoyed it there because one of my sons live in Geneva, so it was very easy from there to fly. Otherwise, I would have not flown there, but I can try to explain to myself that since two of my sons, actually now my third son went to Germany for 1 year, since they live abroad, so I'm allowed to take a flight and fly there to meet my children. But very often, like when I visited my second eldest son in the Philippines last year, I ended up interviewing Maria Ressa, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for journalist, and then went to Marawi in Mindanao. So it's very difficult for me to keep away from the information. I remember one Christmas we lived in London and preparing Christmas, and then I'm reading these things that the things are heating up in Romania. So I had to leave my tearful family and then go to Bucharest and inform that. But very few. If I have holidays, I hope to. I love summers in Finland. I play golf here. I enjoy Finland. I welcome everybody to Finland, which is one of the coolest countries in Europe nowadays. If you are getting enough heat there, and the other thing is having holiday when I'm like in the coming winter. I have some projects, lectures in Cambodia, Vietnam, and I'm going to Taiwan for the presidential elections. Between those, I'm definitely having few days near the swimming pool or just wandering around and trying to limit so that I fly in early November to Asia and come back next year instead of flying back and forth. So that's how I'm trying to calm my bad conscience about not flying too much. Yeah.
Right. Now, since you have visited countries in the 70s and 80s, and I assume that you have visited a very large number of countries 2, 3, or more times, which countries would you say have changed the most since back then,
Yeah. I would say economically, if you are not talking about politics, I mean, I would say China definitely. In the end of 1980s, I had the chance to travel by car. I had a Chinese driver's license from Hong Kong to Beijing all the way, because they had a Hong Kong Beijing rally, and one of the Finnish famous race drivers, Rauli Virtanen, used to live in London same time that I was living there with my family. So he told me that why don't you join the rally as a press, and then not so much paying attention to the rally, me and my Swedish colleagues, we decided to take sideways, because the police was of course taking care that we follow the rally route, and we always said, oh sorry, we got lost, and we got to the villages where the people, Chinese people, never seen foreigners before, because it was very unusual. Normally that time in Beijing, the foreigners, they were allowed to travel maybe 20 kilometers away from the city. So all the way from Hong Kong to Beijing, we traveled around and saw the conditions in the countryside and the poverty in China. And then when I've been there later, of course, the not only the 1989 Tiananmen Revolution, but I've been there in 2003, 2005, many times. So it's amazing, the economic growth of China and the growth of China. But of course, the politics is different there. And some countries are still, well, I cannot compare, but of course, when I'm looking at North Korea, I mean, I don't see too much difference, except the more and more dangerous ballistic missiles and weapons. But people are still, what I hear is suffering in the countryside, and there's no personal freedom. But many countries, Kenya, for example, you see the change mostly in big cities. You see it in Nairobi and other cities. But unfortunately, in many countries in the countryside, now that the clock has been turned back, of course, not 50 years back, but at least 10, 20 years back. But of course, the internet and mobile phones, that's making a big difference than before. So in the material wealth has, but same time, the gap between rich and poor, it's in every country has been growing, and yeah.
True. So is there anything left on your bucket list? A place you haven't been to that you would really still, love to visit, for example?
Where really, not really. When I finished my travel book, I think I ended it with a wish that one day, when there is an airline connection to St. Helena Island in the Indian Ocean, I could go there, because at that time I kept myself so busy that I didn't have time to go to take a ship from Southampton or Cape Town and then going all the way to St. Helena. So just before the pandemic broke out, I was in South Africa doing stories there, and then I noticed that there is a twice a week flight connection to St. Helena. And so I already had lots of information about St. Helena, and I managed to do a story about the Finland's Finnish prisoners of war who were kept there by the English. Some of them died there, and this was very surprising to Finns here. And I told them that I've been to the grave sites of the Finnish fighters there, and I brought them some famous Finnish Jaloviina, the small bottles of brandy on the grave, and etc. So the Finns, how come you have Finnish prisoners of war in St. Helena? And I said they were participating in the Boer War on the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and they were on the Boer side fighting against the British. And the British took few thousands of prisoners of war to St. Helena, among them people from Finland, and some of the letters of one of the prisoner has been kept. So, and I interviewed these prisoners' relatives here in Finland. So it became a good, nice story. And of course, besides visiting Napoleon's house and then that time Napoleon's gravesite there. So I made it to St. Helena, but then after this, I don't want to go to Tristan da Cunha or anywhere. I mean, it's enough for me of collecting far away places, and some places I like to return and I enjoy it. And of course, the problem is that I cannot stop being interested in countries or in people I've met before, what's happening to them, especially in Afghanistan, where I've been 13 times. So things like that I like to follow and keep in touch, but not that urge to travel. Of course, I have to think about when next country is becoming independent, if it's Catalonia or Scotland or New Caledonia, where I have been. But I have to find a way to make a story about the independence celebration, not to go there just because I want to collect. I want to be the first one again to be in all the independent countries. So
well, technically, it should be Bougainville, in 2027, I believe. But
okay.
let's see. I mean, we'll see if that really happens.
If I'm alive, I would like to go there. I've been to Papua New Guinea twice and did some interesting stories there. And I have a friend in Port Moresby who can help me there. Yeah.
Okay, Rauli. When we end interviews, we always ask the same question because we find it interesting. And that question is, if you could invite any 4 people from any period of human history, so you can invite anybody to an imaginary dinner, who would your 4 guests be and why?
Yeah, I was thinking about this first, that I'm sure some people they would like to see Mao and Stalin and Napoleon and Caesar there, but I'm not into that of the late people. If we're talking about, I have 2 alternatives. I would like to invite, of course, Nelson Mandela, Muhammad Ali, and Kofi Annan and Barack Obama. That would make a nice quartet. But really, honestly, what I would love to have is is the people, there are musicians and journalists, altogether 4 of them, who are in Afghanistan and who are looking ways to get out of the country. And if this invitation for dinner outside Afghanistan is supported and manageable, so I would be more than happy to have these people out of the country, and be safe.
Okay. Well, you're really a humanist, Rauli, one of the biggest humanists I have ever had the pleasure to talk to. Well, I don't know what else to say. I wish you a very good luck with the release of your new book. Is there going to be a special event where it's formally sort of launched in Helsinki, or?
Well, it depends on the publishing house. Nowadays, they all complain they are out of the money, but this one is one of the, if not the biggest publishing house. So I'm sure they organize something, and I always organize something to my best friends and to the team who has been working on that. So, but not in the Olympic Stadium, definitely no.
No. Well, being a photo book, it means we can at least understand something. And hopefully maybe this book will make it into English in the longer term. We'll see.
Okay, let's hope so. Yeah, but you are more than welcome to look at the photos there.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Rauli. Enjoy the rest of the Finnish summer, and then enjoy going to Southeast Asia again for the winter.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.